Well, hello. I have a feeling there are some folks who are going to be watching the recording. So I will go ahead and get started. My name is Annelise Sklar. I'm a librarian for political science here at UC San Diego. And while the physical library is still closed for the foreseeable future, I want you to know that the librarian and library staff are still working, most of us from home, but a few folks actually in the library. And we are here to help you. And I want you to know that you can always email me. My email is asklar, ASKLAR at ucsd.edu. I'll put that in the chat too if you don't have it. I'm gonna type that right. And I'm available. You can always send, if you have questions or get stuck with your research, you can always shoot me an email. We can Zoom and talk about your project as well. And we also have a service, a 24/7 Ask a Librarian chat service. So you can always get a hold of somebody, even if it's not necessarily going to be a UC San Diego librarian. It won't be after hours, but you can always get somebody to help you right away. So I have created a few resources that you can refer back to as whenever. And so I'm going to walk through them today, and that means I should probably start sharing my screen. So I'm going to do that. And let's see here. And I am super foiled. Okay. So you guys should all see a window now, and it's the library's website. It's library.ucsd.edu. And just to sort of get you oriented, this is a great place to start doing your research. There's this big search box in the middle of the page, and it defaults to our library catalog, which is how you find books, film, video, maps, government documents, and it will tell you whether or not we own a journal, but it will not tell you what's inside. And this is also both how you find physical items and ebooks, streaming videos, things like that. And you can search by keyword. I've realized something that students haven't realized. If you know the title of something that you're looking for, you can, this box drops down and you can just search for the title instead. So Roger's our library catalog. A lot of what you're going to be doing is looking for articles. And so we've set this up as an article search. It's not great, but it's a good place to start if you're just sort of generally looking for articles. We have all sorts of databases. We have several hundred of them that are better places for finding articles. And we'll be walking through one for political science today. If you're looking specifically for a journal, you can also just search for that. Again, it's the title of the journal, not the article title. The digital collections tab is just kind of confusing to people. This is actually usually our special collections that we've digitized. For some reason, library folks call the content we buy e-resources and the content we buy digital collections. That's really confusing. And you can also search across our research guides, but I will show you how to get to our full list and search our website. So just showing you guys that is here, and that's sort of how this search box works. And then we have these tabs up at the top for getting started. And let's see. And so the first thing that I want to make sure everybody knows about is here under computing and technology, there's this connect from off campus. And these are our instructions for setting up the VPN. And so a lot of our resources are licensed for the UCSD community. So they're web-based, but you need to be coming in off a UCSD IP address. And so if you haven't set this up, this is the way to get access if you're not coming in from on campus. And there are instructions for each major operating system and what it is. It's a piece of software that you download called AnyConnect. And then when you want to connect to the VPN, you just connect to it. And let's see, I think I want to share the entirety of my PC. I would share my whole screen so you make sure that you actually see what I'm doing. And so once it's installed, you open the software, you log in. You're going to make sure you're connecting to, it says vpn.ucsd.edu, and it gives you this pop-up. This group here should say two-step secured all through UCSD. There are a whole bunch of different options, but this is the only one that will actually work with our resources. And then you log in with your username and password, and these are the same that you would log into Canvas or your email with. And then just like that, you're going to have to grab your phone and do duo authentication. So we're going to make sure we're doing that and make sure we're connected before I get started. Okay, so and all right, so that's step 0. So you want to make sure that you are connected. So to actually access our collections, so in addition to that search box, up here in the upper left is research and collections. And we have the list of our databases. So I said we had several hundred of them. So if you know exactly what database you're looking for, it's just a list in alphabetical order. And then we have these subject and course guides. And these subject and course guides, librarians have put together a guide for pretty much every discipline here on campus. I think there are a few gaps, but we have most of them. So we do have political science. There's one for law, one for international studies. If you're an area studies person, we do have guides for Japanese studies, Chinese studies, Latin American studies, somewhere. We try to arrange them by division, but that means that some of them are in the Division of Arts and Humanities and some of them are in the Division of Social Sciences, so they are split up. But we do have those core area studies that we are admittedly missing a couple, and a couple major ones. We're currently missing Middle Eastern studies and African studies, so those are actually major, but we do collect in those areas. We just haven't had anybody put together a guide yet. So going to our political science guide. So this is a guide that I've put together for students and for faculty, and admittedly, it's gotten a little bit out of control. So bear with me. And if you find something that is broken or isn't clear, I'm always open to feedback. And if you find something that's really awesome that you think should be included on the guide, also feel free to let me know. And so I've set this up with some links to key resources and that students tend to be interested in. A lot of students, just as a heads up, a lot of students really are always looking for the top newspapers. And so you can actually, we've got a page within our Factiva subscription where you can read the articles from those top newspapers. The big database for political science scholarly articles is Worldwide Political Science Abstracts. So I have a link right there, sort of in the best bets. And then there are a few other things that I think people would be interested in. So what I've done today is that I've got some slides that I'm going to go through. Usually when I come to a class, I go through these slides, and then I also create what I call a mini workbook. And so I've got one here if you want to follow along. It's over on the right-hand side, should be. Oh, it's down at the bottom underneath my profile. And I will put the link in here. It's just a Google Doc, so you can make a copy if you would like. And I'll put the link in the chat. It opens up. I think I've got too many windows open. keep clicking the chat button. Where is my chat? There we go. So, all right, so there's the link if you would like to follow along with the workbook. But the idea is basically it's a workbook to sort of work you through your topic as you're doing research. And so it's just sort of a nice thing to have if you sort of want to walk through step by step. And so I've also got these slides. Usually they go hand in hand, but I think I would rather just sort of go through them and then leave time for questions. So I see there's somebody in the waiting room, so I will admit them. Okay, so let's get started here with the slides. And actually, let me just do, all right, does that look better? You don't see your own faces? Okay, so doing library research. So the research process in a nutshell, you start with a question or a topic. You think about where the answer might have been or a piece of the puzzle. So you may be looking in multiple places, but so where an answer or part of an answer might have been, somebody might have written about it or talked about it. Then you're going to choose tools that will help you find those types of sources, so publications or other information sources. And then you actually use the tools to try to find that information. And then you keep repeating the process until you have enough for your project. So, and as I mentioned, again, VPN is very important. So I always include that here because a lot of people will get to a certain point and then they get stuck because they aren't on the VPN. So I can't emphasize how important it is to get this set up as soon as you can before you get started. All right, so now you're actually doing research. So you're going to start. You have it. So you have maybe you already have a full hypothesis. Maybe you have a research question. More likely, you have a general topic that you want to work into a research question or a hypothesis. And so, start with that idea. So I was thinking a big topic is how young people are voting at lower rates than older people. So maybe my initial question, at least, is, so what are some ways to improve voter turnout among young people? And so when you start researching, and you probably do this when you Google and don't even really think about it, the first thing you do is you're going to break your statement into key concepts. So in this case, it's young people is one concept and voter turnout is another. And then you want to start thinking about the ways that people are going to describe those concepts or address those concepts when they're talking about them in sources that would be good. So you might want to start thinking about other terms that people are going to use. So they might say young people, they might say youth, they might say college students. More broadly, they might just talk about age, maybe generations. And then the same thing with voter turnout, so it might be that phrase voter turnout. It might be voting, it might be more broadly elections, might talk about, young people at the polls, so any of those words might be the ones that show up in articles that look useful to me. When you're thinking about this, you're also sort of going to want to be trying to keep an eye out for, the things you're looking for are the who, the what, the when, the where, and then you're going to be answering, hopefully, the why and the how with your research. And so this question doesn't have a specific where and when. It's sort of, the when is now-ish, and the where is anywhere for now, but I might want to scope that down depending on what I look at, so I, very least, probably looking at democracies where people actually vote. So you don't have to have a who, what, when, where, but at least sort of try to think about whether or not you need one or not. And this is particularly useful too. So if you're doing historic research, and you're looking at a time period and it's a named time period, that could be a good search term as well. So, like the Renaissance is a named time period. And so when I do this, I like to actually just sort of sketch it out on a mind map on paper. So that's another way to do it too. So if you're a list person or a mind map person. So the next thing you want to do is you want to choose sources that would actually be useful for this project. And you're going to want sources that give you background information. You're going to want sources that serve as examples or evidence. You're going to want sources that make an argument, and you're going to want sources with methodology or theory. And one source may do several of these things, or some sources may just do only one of those things. As you're putting your paper together, you want to think about having these different pieces so you can build this cohesive story or narrative or argument. And so as you're thinking about this, each tool we have will help you find different kinds of information. So we're sort of used to sort of one-stop shopping with Google, but it isn't really one-stop shopping, and there's a lot out there if you know where to look for these things. But conversely, there's a lot out there. So if you don't know where to look for these things, it's just overwhelming because as I said, we have 400 some databases. So, okay. So first type of source, we're a library, we love books, we have a lot of books. Books are great places to find in-depth coverage of a topic. But on the flip side, they do usually take at least a year, and that's really ambitious for it to get written and published. Scholarly books often take several years to write and get published. So a book is going to give you depth, but it's not going to cover the most recent events. And where you want to find books, Roger, which I mentioned on our website, that library catalog tab, Roger is the place to find books. And again, we have an extensive collection of ebooks. Not every book is available electronically. I try to buy as much as I can electronically. But there are still some things that are only available in person. So right now, while the library is closed, we actually have a little bit more. So we have the ebooks that we normally have, and then we have our print books. And we are a member of a group called the Hottie Trust. And the Hottie Trust is where libraries like UCSD put the books that Google has scanned from our libraries. And so if a book that we own has been scanned into Hottie Trust, we currently have access to scans of these books through Hottie Trust. So not everything that we own in print is in Hottie Trust, but a lot is. So, and it's not a beautiful interface. You do have to read it on the screen. You can't download the books, but while we're all working from home and remotely, and people are around the world, it's a really nice extra way to get access to these books. That said, we do now offer curbside pickup for the books that are not available on Hottie Trust, and you can request them through Roger. So if you are in San Diego, and it's not instant, it takes a couple of days because somebody actually has to pull it and then check it out, and then walk over to, we're using UCSD's single curbside pickup in the Osler structure. So usually it takes a couple of days because we only have a few people working actually in the library right now. But you do have access to the books while we are closed. So I just wanted you guys to know about that. Also, if it turns out you just need a book chapter, we can scan it for you. So you don't even have to get the physical book. You can request that scan through Roger. But wait, there's more. So a few other ways to get a hold of books. If we don't own the book at all, you can we have a couple of different services where we can get books brought over from other libraries. So there's Circuit, which is for other San Diego libraries. So USD, San Diego State, and the City of San Diego Public Library, and then the San Diego County Library. So we can have books brought to campus also for curbside pickup, and then when things are open again for pickup in Kaisel. And then we also have Melville, and Melville is a tool that tries to be many things to many people. If you remember on that beginning screen on the library where I showed you that articles tab, that's actually also Melville. And Melville is not great at being many things to many people, but one of the other things that it does is it has all of the holdings for all of the 10 UC campuses. So not just San Diego, but UCLA, Berkeley, et cetera. And then also it has the holdings for many libraries across the country. And so we can request books either from a UC or from one of those other libraries. And the service is now active again. It's much slower than it is when the world is a little bit more normal, just because most libraries are only partially open. But if there is a book that we don't have, we can probably get you a copy. So just sort of keep in mind that we do have those things. And then, okay, moving on from books, the other kind of source that you're probably going to be using most often are scholarly articles. And scholarly articles cover more specific topics than books. They're written by academic experts. They usually cover a more specific topic. I think I just said that. And they're published a little bit more quickly than a book. So, a book usually takes a couple of years. Scholarly article could take as few as a few months. Usually it's more like a year because somebody still has to go out and collect the data, analyze the data, write the data, or write up their paper and then submit it, and it goes through the submission process. But again, at 20 pages instead of a few hundred, that process can be faster. And as I said, we have literally hundreds of databases for finding articles. So other types of sources that you might hear about, especially if you were an MMW student, you may remember the term primary sources. These are materials that are that document an event when it happened or as close to when it happened as possible. So typical examples would be like a news source, so a newspaper article. Social media could be a firsthand eyewitness account. Government publications or official documents are often primary sources. So like the transcript of a hearing. And then first-person accounts, things like oral histories, or again, if you're doing more historic research, it could be somebody's diary or letters. And we have all sorts of databases that have digitized versions of these. We do actually have a database that collects Twitter data. We have all sorts of newspaper databases. We are a federal depository library, so we do have government documents. We are also a California depository library, and we do have a collection of San Diego government documents as well. And we have some from international organizations, even though we are not officially a depository. And see a chat, if I can get that open with my many screens open here. Now I can't get this open. All right. Oh, so you're asking about the database of Twitter data. And the database of Twitter data is called Brandwatch, and it used to be called Crimson Hexagon. Now it's called Brandwatch, and it's something. If it's something that you're interested in, shoot me an email because I have to set you up with an account, and it's got some weird things, but I will happily set you up with an account and give you more information. But that is really popular with political scientists. So. Even it's got some weird limitations like download limits, but it still does some pretty neat things and is a lot easier to use than the command line and the API. And then we also have, databases of statistics and data sets. ICPSR is a repository that's been collecting data for about 60 years, and ICPSR stands for Inter-University Consortium of Political and Social Research. So they've been collecting this kind of data for a really long time. We also have databases of statistics. There's one called Data Planet, another one, Statistical Insight. So we have some of these great tools once you really dig into them. All right. So moving along, just sort of how you would think about data. So I like to show this timeline, even though I don't necessarily agree with the exact time frame here that is shown. And so, again, so it shows books as a year and scholarly journals as 3 or more months, whereas books are probably a few years and scholarly journal articles are probably more like a year. But if you think about how information is created, you start with social media can be sort of instant. You have no idea if it's true because it hasn't been verified, but it can be that sort of instant eyewitness account. And then you have news articles, so you have professional journalists trying to sort out the facts, and you may have a breaking story that makes the news, within, could be within, minutes, it could be within an hour or hours. And the stories then sort of develop and get more refined as more information builds, and the stories get sort of longer and more complex as more details emerge. And you can have weekly magazines, monthly magazines, as those still exist in the digital world. And then you can have researchers doing actual research on these, and then turning those concepts and events and questions about them into scholarly journals and books. So we talked about resources a little bit. My favorite ones, I mentioned Worldwide Political Science Abstracts. This is the database for finding resources in political science literature. And it's a nice database because everything in there was chosen with political scientists in mind. So if you're doing political science research, that's probably where you want to start, because while not everything in there is going to be officially scholarly, it is in there because it would be relevant to political science research. And then another tool, so Worldwide Political Science Abstracts comes from a vendor called ProQuest. Two of our big vendors for these different types of databases for so we have all sorts of databases. We have things like sociological abstracts, econ lit. So we have all these subject-specific databases, and then we have databases that do other things like JSTOR, which is an archive of full text, but there are lots of things that aren't in JSTOR. But ProQuest and EBSCO are the two big vendors for these subject-specific databases. And what I usually tell people is start with Worldwide Political Science Abstracts, and then if you're doing a topic that goes across the social sciences, even though we don't have a great discovery system, we are in the process of migrating to one. So hopefully by fall that will be in place. And I mentioned Melville sort of does this, but not particularly well. But with the ProQuest and EBSCO databases, you can actually search across all the ProQuest databases and all the EBSCO databases. So it's not doing one search, but it's doing two. And that's another way to really expand what's available to you. And then I talked about reports. So we have some Google custom search engines that are actually my favorites that will just search parts of certain domains within Google. So you can just search IGO websites or just search NGO websites. But then we also have some special iLibraries. So we have iLibraries and eLibraries. We have World Bank eLibrary, IMF iLibrary, OECD iLibrary. So we have collections from some of these organizations as well. And then we also have some separate ProQuest tools, one that searches congressional documents and one that searches British parliamentary documents as well. So we have a lot of these different types of sources. And so once you sort of have an idea what your question is and what some of the terms are and what some of the sorts of sources that you would want to look at, whether, you know, I want to look at books and I want to look at articles, maybe I want to look at news articles, but maybe I don't, then it's time to actually start thinking about how you're going to search these tools. And so the first thing I usually do is have people come up with, so once you have your keywords, sort of think about how you want to put them together. And so most of our databases use what's called Boolean logic. And the idea, you don't have to remember what that's called, but the idea is that you combine terms with ands, ors. Sometimes you can use the word not as well. And some of these symbols. And so the idea behind and is to connect separate concepts together. So I want the concept of youth to show up, and I want the concept of voting, so I could type in youth and voting. Or on the other hand, you use, for evenly weighted terms, so I want just one of these terms to show up. So I want either the term voting to show up or the term elections to show up, but I don't need both. So I could do voting or elections. And then a lot of our databases will let you use truncation, where you take the root of a word and then you just lop off the end and replace it with a symbol. And so most of our databases use an asterisk, but sometimes it'll be an exclamation point, it'll be a question mark. So in this case, you know, I could do elect, E-L-E-C-T with an asterisk, and I would get, you know, elected, electing, elections, elected, so on and so forth. The one caveat here is if you lop off too much, then you can get words that aren't related. So I could also get electricity here, which depending on what I'm searching, you know, in worldwide political science abstracts, I'll probably mostly get elections. If I'm searching more generally, I might get way too much on electricity, youth and electricity. My other favorite example is using POLI for politics, policy, so on, but you also get things like police, which may or may not be exactly what you're looking for. And then another thing you can do in databases, and you can do this in Google Scholar as well, is if you're looking for a phrase and a term particularly as a phrase, you can put it in quotation marks. So if I'm looking specifically for voter turnout as a phrase, I could put those together as with quotation marks. And there's a question about whether you will have access to these slides. Yes, you will. And these slides are actually, they're embedded in the guide I have for political science. And I should have said, if you want to follow along, you are more than welcome to. But they are there for you to go back and look at. It's a good question. And so if I were actually going to string these together as a search, I could do young people in quotes and vote with an asterisk or elect with an asterisk. And note that I did parentheses around vote or elect. One other thing about Boolean logic is that it sort of follows the same rules of algebraic order of operations. If you ever thought you would use that again, it does actually come in handy. So it will read left to right, but if you group things in parentheses, it will see them as a group to work on first. So depending on how the database was programmed, if I hadn't put the parentheses, young people and vote or elect might give me young people and vote as a cluster, and then or anything with the word elect in it, which could give me a lot of things that weren't what I was looking for. So, all right. Oops. So this is what this looks like in a database. I will actually run this search live when I get to the end of the slide, so you can actually see how this works. But you literally can type this in as the search, or you can use the search boxes that they've given you, just sort of whatever makes the most sense to you. And so then once you've run your search, most of our databases have all sorts of limits, so you can narrow your search results down. Usually I limit down by publication date. So a lot of the topics that political scientists are working on are contemporary topics. So I might want to start by looking at just the most recent 5 or 10 years, and then expand backwards, looking for critical literature. That might be one way to go. You might want to limit by publication type. So so everything in Worldwide Political Science Abstracts is specifically for political scientists, but there are different types of articles. So there are scholarly articles, there are citations, dissertations, there are book chapters and books. I think there are some news sources, things like that. So I might just want to look at those in chunks, depending on, again, depending on how I want to approach the topic. You can also usually limit by language of publication. So a lot of the time you'll get an English language abstract, but the article might be in another language. Because academia is very English centered, most of the articles are in English, but especially if you're doing a topic on a non-English speaking geography, you may find a lot of the key articles are not originally in English. And then there's also a limit in a lot of these databases, so you can specifically choose peer-reviewed articles. A lot of the time, faculty members will specifically want you to use peer-reviewed articles. So that's an easy way to make sure that you are using them if you're only looking at those. A couple other tricks when you're in the database, when you're going through your search results, these databases do have controlled vocabulary. So including Roger, so they'll have subject headings. So these might turn out to be good search terms, especially if you're not exactly sure about your terms. If you look at those subject headings, one of those might wind up being a better term to search under. And then you can find additional citations. So you probably know that when you're looking at a paper, it'll have a bibliography of works cited. And so some of those might be works that you want to go back and look at. And then a lot of databases, Google Scholar does this actually really well, and then Worldwide Political Science Abstracts does this too. You can find articles that cite the article you're looking at, so you can find more recent work that mentions your work and presumably would then be on the same topic. So that's sort of a way to move forwards and backwards. Once all you have to do is find one good thing, and hopefully it can help you find leads to other things. And so this is what that actually looks like when you run that search. And again, I will actually run this live so you can see how that works. But you can see the over here on the left are those different limits, and the top by publication type and by publication date. And you can see just sort of what kind of information is included. I should mention Worldwide Political Science Abstracts is a database of abstracts. It is not necessarily full text. It often links to the full text. We often have the full text somewhere else, but just sort of be prepared, especially if you're used to searching JSTOR where everything is full text. There are often a couple more steps, but usually they're not more than a few clicks. So, all right. So I mentioned the peer review process, and just to reiterate this, if you didn't hear about this in one of your writing programs or one of your other classes, the idea behind peer review is that the author does their research and they write their manuscript, and then they submit their work to a journal. And then the journal will then send that manuscript out to other experts in the field, so the author's peers, and they will decide whether that work should be accepted, revised before being accepted, or rejected outright. And so the idea behind peer review is it's not that the work that isn't in peer reviewed journals is bad, and there are all sorts of journals that have an editorial process that maybe isn't blind like this, but is still experts reviewing the journal. Um, so just, again, it sort of depends on the topic. But so what I tell people is it's not that you don't want to look at the work that isn't peer reviewed, but you do want to make sure that you're looking at the work that is peer reviewed. And the reason is if you're trying to build a good, solid, scholarly work, so if you're building your hypothesis and you're building your research methods based on, you want to build on good research. And so that in theory, and there are always exceptions to the rule, but in theory, if a work has gone through the peer-reviewed process, it's already been accepted as quality piece of the scholarly discourse. And so when you're building your arguments, building on that solid foundation will make yours that much stronger. Hope that sort of makes sense. But that's why people are so concerned about peer reviews. You want to build good research on good research. So, okay, so I mentioned a lot of our worldwide political science abstracts and a lot of our databases don't have full text. So you may have seen on that screen that there were links that would say full text, and you may have seen that there were links that had this UC eLinks button. And UC eLinks will connect you out to full text if we have the full text in another database. So a lot of the time we buy full text directly from the publisher. We have some databases that have a lot of full text like JSTOR, but there are a lot of things that, again, aren't in JSTOR. And so UC eLinks is the way to connect between them. And then if we don't have full text, you can look in Roger and see if we have the journal or whatever it is in print. And I will mention UC eLinks works a lot better for articles than it does for anything else. So anything that's not an article, I always go back and double check Roger. And then again, if we don't have access, you can request it from another library. So if it's an article or a book chapter, we can get you a scan from another library, just like we could get a scan from our own. And if it's a book, again, you can get it through Circuit or Melville and have it shipped over. And if it's something that's just completely stumping you, shoot me an email and we can try to figure it out together. And I will also mention, if you are looking at dissertations, a lot of the time dissertations are now just freely available on the web if you Google the title. So there are sometimes tricks. It never hurts to Google the title if you don't find it through these tools. And so this is what a UC eLinks screen looks like. So you can see this one was available online and it gives you links to where you should be able to find it online. If that wasn't there, it would prompt you to search Roger and Melville to try to request it. To be honest, once you've searched Roger, if it's not electronically and it's not in Roger, you can just use this, request this from the library to start that interlibrary loan process. And by the way, interlibrary loan is free to UCSD students. So again, it's not instant because it probably means that somebody had to go scan it at another library. So if your paper is due tomorrow, even if it's an article, it might be too late. But if your paper is due in a couple of weeks, it never hurts. So just make sure to give yourself enough time. And again, with books, they do have to be shipped. So make sure that you give enough time for something to go through the mail or UPS or FedEx. All right, so we are in the home stretch. A couple other things: make sure that you get your citation information as you are going, so that you don't have to recreate this at the end, which is what I always did when I was in college. And it's like, oh, where did this article come from? I forgot to write down a piece. So our databases will let you email the records to yourself. The ProQuest databases and the EBSCO databases will let you actually format the citation in the style of your choice. So as long as you're using a common one like APA, Chicago, or MLA, you should be able to do that. And if you're writing a bigger paper, it's probably worth learning to use a tool like Zotero or EndNote Web or Mendeley. All of those are free. We do have some added features with EndNote Web related to some of our databases, database subscriptions, but all of those are free for you. But you can then organize your citations. You can put them in folders, and it can help you export your bibliographies and things like that. So if you're doing a lot, it might be worth starting that at the beginning of your project rather than the end. I always touch on plagiarism just a little bit. I am a strong believer that plagiarism, when it happens at UCSD, is mostly accidental because paraphrasing is really hard. So, be very careful about putting things in your own words. And my general rule of thumb is, when in doubt, cite it. But we do have this little flow chart. So if you thought of it completely out of your head based on nothing else that you read, you do not need to cite it. Otherwise, the next question is whether or not it's common knowledge. And common knowledge is indisputable fact. So UCSD is in La Jolla, California is indisputable fact. If it's anything about why something happened or how something happened, that's an argument, and that's something you're going to want to cite. And again, if you ever have questions, you can email me, you can contact the library for any of the librarians. We have a general email, and I mentioned the 24/7 chat. And always run it by your instructor or your TA. So better to oversight than to undercite. And the reason people cite things is because people who are actually interested in the topic want to go back and find additional work. So just like when you're doing your research and you want to find more articles on a topic and you go to their works cited, same idea. People who are interested in the work you're doing want to go back and look at more work on the topic. All right, so at this point, you have been doing some searching and finding some things, hopefully, and you might want to take a step back and just sort of evaluate what you found. So some things to think about: does it answer your question? Who wrote this? Are they credible? Can you tell who they are, what their credentials are? And can you, if you look at the sources that they cite, do those look like they're credible sources? Again, this is another reason to use the scholarly databases from the library, is because, worldwide political science abstracts is actually, the content, sometimes it's a little bit slow because it's actually selected by humans. So it's more likely to be credible because it was chosen specifically for political science scholars. Whereas if you're just out on the web, you actually do have to pay a little bit more attention and think a little bit more critically about what you found if you don't know exactly what it is. And then also, just, is this source current enough? So I always tell this story. A few years ago, I was working with a student who was doing a paper on security at Mexico's southern border. And her most recent article was from maybe 4 or 5 years before. And, it was a really hot current topic. So, make sure that you have them. If you're doing a contemporary topic, make sure you have the most recent information. The older information might be good and you want to include it as well, but you want to make sure that you haven't not found the most recent work that's out there. And again, so as I said, I think at the beginning, research is an iterative process. So you're going to try different tools and keep repeating the process until you have enough. Try different tools, try different keywords. And, and most of the databases have help screens. So take a look at those. See, we have another chat. So let me get out a full screen here and chat. And thanks for coming. And if you do need to go, this is being recorded, so you're not held hostage if you need to go. Hoping you guys can still see my screens. All right. I'm hoping you'll holler if you don't still see my screens. All right, so, and again, as I said, when you find good hits, look at the subject headings and descriptors, and try those new terms. So you're going to read a little bit, you're going to be like, oh, that's how people are talking about this. Let me try that term. I was working on a question today, and somebody who was looking for how many laws were passed by state legislatures. And as I was trying to figure this out, I came across an article that referred to this as legislative productivity. So I'm like, okay, I'll try this term. So it really is you know, sort of paying attention to how it's being described and then using those terms instead or in addition. So to recap the process, you start with a question or a topic. You think about where that answer would have come from, and or where people might have written about or talked about the answer to your question or part of the answer to your question. And I will say, if there is one person who has completely answered your question, maybe it's not the best topic for an actual research paper, because the idea of the research paper is to pull together these different ideas and synthesize them together. So keep that in mind also. You're going to need different sources that may have differing opinions. So, you know, once you sort of have an idea of what you might want to look at, then you choose the tools to find those types of sources, and then you actually use them and repeat the process. So that is the end of my slides. I realize I did not put in the chat for folks who came late that we have this guide for political science. So this is what I've been starting on. This is a guide I've put together for researchers in political science, and it has links to different sources that I think would be useful depending on what it is you're looking for. And it's arranged, so it's got best bets on the front page. Most undergraduates can probably do pretty well with just the sources on the front page. And also we do have this, I should mention, we have this guide called Get Started, which sort of walks you through basic library research as well. So if you've never gone through any of these workshops before, or if you just want a refresher, that's a good place to look. But then I have these tabs with more expanded, with more additional information, more additional places to look. Again, depending on the topic. So whether you're looking for books or articles, we have a whole guide to finding news sources. If you're looking for data, reports and documents, we have a whole guide for law. We have a whole guide for primary sources, like making guides. And then there are these big sort of ginormous lists of links. And then I've tried to pull together some of my favorite sources within some of the different specialties. I also wanted to highlight, because I know folks had a lot of questions about writing, there is this tab here for writing and citing. So we have links to style manuals. Unfortunately, APA and MLA, the official versions, are not available electronically. They are hidden away in the reference collection in Geisel right now. But the APSA style manual is electronic. The Chicago Manual of Style is electronic. And a couple of things, if you're not familiar with them, The Craft of Research is the book that is used in the honors class for writing. And I think Dr. Feely uses it in her classes. So this might be a good one to skim through whenever you're stuck, or if you're interested in learning more about writing. We have both the 4th edition and the third edition electronically. The reason I have both here is because it looks like we only have the 4th edition electronically through while we are closed. So that may go away eventually, but it's probably going to get you through the rest of this year. I also just discovered we have the SAGE Handbook of Research Methods in Political Science and International Relations. So this is also a good place just to sort of poke around if you're doing a particular kind of research, if you're doing an honors project, independent study, internship, and paper, anything that's sort of beyond your usual 10-week quarter class, that might give you some ideas about getting started. And then we also have this guide to doing your undergraduate project that I thought looked pretty useful. And both of those last two things are part of this larger collection called Sage Research Methods. So if you are doing more research, those that's another really good place to find, sort of how to do a research method, how to do a research project of this particular type in the social sciences. And it's even got some handbooks on particular types of qualitative and quantitative analysis. So there's a lot in there. If you're like me and you kind of geek out at seeing these things, there's a lot in there to explore. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, because I know folks did have questions about writing papers. Purdue has a really good guide. Their writing program is called OWL, and they have really good guides. And they've been doing these guides since I was in college, which has been a while now. And they've just been building them up, but they have some really great guides to writing. And I also do want to give a plug to the Teaching and Learning Commons, the TLC, who are still providing consultations with peer writing tutors. I think you can schedule appointments via Zoom. And they also offer a whole bunch of workshops. So they are there to help you with your writing. So take advantage of it if you're feeling stuck. Don't feel like you're stuck on your own. They are there and they are better at it than I am, but I'm always happy to, I've helped a lot of students over the years. I've been here 14 years now. So I have seen a lot of students and we've gone through a lot of writing projects together. So I can help you and they can help you too. And so I always wind up talking way too much. I will stop sharing my screen now. And did I already stop sharing my screen? I probably already stopped sharing my screen. And I'm happy to take questions if folks have them, or you can put them in the chat or just talk.
It looks like a student wrote earlier in the presentation if they would have access to a copy of the slides. And so
oh, yes, good question. So these slides are actually embedded. So on this guide, which is, I put the link in the chat, these slides are embedded right here. I don't know if you can, I'm not still sharing my screen. They're embedded in the middle of this of the screen, and you can view them in full screen, and you can also view my notes, which are more or less what I was saying or thought I should say. So they are there, and also if you came in right after the first couple of minutes, also on the guide in the lower right hand corner is what I call my mini workbook. And so this is literally just pages. It's sort of the same thing as the slides, as the workbook, but same thing as the slides in a Google Doc. But it also is there sort of to take you through step by step with your own topic. So if you have a project right now and you're feeling stuck, literally you can write down, each step, what are my keywords? Which of these databases do I want to choose? If you want to keep track, some people really like writing these things down. Some people just like, diving right in. So whichever process works best for you, but that is there. And again, I am available to help on the library's main page. I'll just share that screen. There is also this Ask Us section. And so you can email me directly. You can also contact us. So you can send an email. We have folks who checking the general email every hour during the day, during the week. So you might get a faster response, or it might get routed to me and sit in my inbox for a little while. Though I've been trying to get through things every day. Some days I just don't. You can also make an appointment with me or another librarian. You can shoot me an email directly. or another subject librarian directly. So if you're in another class, feel free to contact them. And again, I mentioned we have the 24/7 chat, which is during the day, you're probably going to get somebody from somewhere in the UC system, but not always. And then after 4 or 5, you're probably going to get somebody from another library, but they are all trained librarians, so they can sort of figure out how to work through our site. And then we check all the transcripts. So if they miss something, we will follow up, either me or one of my colleagues.